Are you cruising without a refrigerator? Or do you just need more room for perishable items? A cooler can be a great addition on a cruising boat, if you choose the right one. Hi there, I'm Carolyn Sherlock, and on this episode of the Boat Galley Podcast, I'll share some things to think about before buying a cooler for food storage, and how to tell if you need the more expensive ones or if you can get by with something simpler. Today's episode of the Boat Galley Podcast is sponsored by Mantis Marine, maker of the Mantis Anchor, now available in models both with and without a roll bar. Proven to set reliably in the most challenging bottoms, the Mantis Anchor digs in like no other, making anchoring safer and boating more enjoyable. Mantis Marine brings to market practical, durable, and affordable marine products, including their anchoring gear, scuba diving accessories, a rechargeable waterproof headlamp for hands-free lighting, and their latest product, a solar charging navigation light, perfect for dinghies. Visit mantismarine.com and see for yourself. If you don't have a refrigerator, a good cooler is invaluable for being able to store food and have fresh produce that can't be kept at room temperature. With a good cooler for storing food, you can have a tremendous variety of foods and menus available and won't feel like you're just making do. But when you start looking at a food storage cooler, as opposed to one that'll just keep drinks or one to keep food cool for an hour on the way home from the store, you'll quickly see that there is a huge price difference in various brands. Do you really need to spend $300 or more for a decent icebox? Well, my basic answer is no, but it comes with several caveats. I'll start by saying that I don't have personal experience using any of the expensive coolers. I have friends and campground acquaintances who have told me their experiences. I looked really seriously at the expensive coolers several years ago, before we made a 2-month tent camping trip, over half of it in temperatures over 90 degrees. I finally decided to start out with a Coleman Extreme 70-quart cooler that cost less than $50 and see if it would do what we needed. It did, and we've used it on several more trips. Once you get into the coolers that are marketed as 5 or 6 day coolers, the insulation seems to be fairly equal in all of them, regardless of price. It's about 2 inches thick. The difference between the ones that sell for $100 or less and those going for $300 or more seems to be in the overall construction quality and features. On the more expensive coolers, the lid has a sturdy latch. On cheaper ones, it doesn't. It's just kind of a tight fit. Without a latch, it can be a real problem if the cooler tips over. This can be a major consideration if you anticipate possibly rough weather, or if a knockdown might be possible. Now, more expensive coolers have much more rugged hinges, and that's important if anyone aboard isn't very gentle or if there's lots of people getting in and out all the time. With a cheaper one, carry duct tape and be prepared to improvise a little hinge. Now, many of the less expensive coolers have drink holders in the top, which seems like a wonderful feature, until you realize that where that cutout is, there's almost no insulation. Fill the cup holder with foam peanuts and duct tape over the top, and it will help solve the problem. Now, the more expensive coolers tend to have places designed for tie-downs that are beefed up accordingly. With the cheaper ones, you'll have to run lines to the handles, and the handles haven't been designed to take this type of load and are more likely to break. Drain plugs are also more rugged on the more expensive units and less likely to leak or pop open. Okay, so when do you want to buy a tougher cooler? Well, the thing is that if you're using it an awful lot, if you're going to plan to use this for years and years, etc., it's going to be cheaper in the long run to buy a good, expensive cooler like the Yetis, some of the coolers, not the refrigerator freezers, things like that. They really are more robust. If you're spending time in protected waters, you probably don't need the expensive cooler, but if you'll be in rough conditions, the extra features and robustness will pay off in the long run. Now, a couple other tips for storing food in a cooler, buying a cooler for that purpose. The larger the cooler, the more efficient it will be. If you use that extra space for more ice, if it just holds more air, it'll be less efficient. A 65 or 70 quart cooler is about the minimum size needed to have enough ice and still have space for food. All white marine coolers really do a better job of insulating if they are sitting in the sun. But if you're going to throw a blanket over the cooler for extra insulation, it doesn't matter what color the cooler is. Soft-sided coolers are great for things like taking them to the store or defrosting the refrigerator, but they are totally insufficient for long-term storage. They just don't have the insulation. And I've never seen a styrofoam cooler that was up to the task. The lids don't fit tightly enough and the styrofoam tends to break. The Coleman coolers that are steel belted and look like the ones available 30 or more years ago just are not the same. They are not nearly as bulletproof as they used to be, and the insulation is not as good as their Extreme series. The so-called 12-volt coolers have way too large a current draw to use aboard most boats. They're typically about 4 amps and run constantly, no on and off cycling. So that's 90 amp hours per 24-hour day. That's almost exactly the same as what a 12-volt refrigerator would use. So if you're looking at something like that, you're better off getting the Engel refrigerator freezer. The 12-volt coolers also will only chill items a maximum of about 40 degrees below the ambient temperature, and you cannot put ice in them to add to the cold. If you're going to be lugging the ice chest up and down the dock regularly, a wheeled one will make it much easier, but you can use a dolly or a dock cart. They'll work just as well if you already have one, and it will definitely be sturdier. Wheels and axles on coolers tend to break easily on rough grounds. If you're new to cruising without a refrigerator, or if you have plans to install a refrigerator in the near future, I'd go with one of the cheaper coolers unless you are 100% positive that you need the beefier features in the short run. The expensive coolers have their place. I'm not remotely arguing against them. However, for coolers who spend weekends or even a week or two at a time on the boat in reasonably sheltered water, the cheaper ones will do just as well. Now, if you want to see the ones that I like, take a look in the show notes for this podcast. There's links to a couple of them there. And take care. That's the end of this podcast. We'll talk to you again a week from now. And please be sure to subscribe so that you get all of our podcasts, and let any friends know about our podcast if you think it might help them. We also love it when you leave us reviews. Thanks.